after the discussion is open to the floor, if any of you have questions for us.
Challenges to protecting women's rights in India? Big question. Just to introduce myself, I'm Meenakshi. I work with Human Rights Watch. It is an NGO which works in 90 countries. I'm the South Asia Director. I work on South Asia on a range of issues including women's rights. And this is something that Kavita and I have been talking about for a long time. Partly because of what happened in December, and since then, this discussion has actually found a lot more currency, which is perverse really, because for a long time when we were working on sexual rights and rape laws, no one talked about it. And then now when I travel, and I'm sure this happened with all of you, there's suddenly this whole thing of what's going on with India, man. I mean, your men are all rapists, what's going on? All the women are getting raped. You keep hearing this stuff. And I constantly say that that is not what you should look at. What you should look at is that sexual violence is widely prevalent in India, but this is the first time that people came out on the streets and began to talk about it. And that is the positive thing that happened. But that said, I mean, Kavita, you asked me what are the problems. And I think it's largely to do with how we look at it. I mean, before coming here, I was at the Lit Fest with friends of mine having a panel on sexual violence, and we were talking through some of the things that we were going to discuss because I wasn't going to be there, I was going to be here. And I said one of the problems that I have is even to call this woman Nirbhaya, or the fearless one, because she didn't set out to be the fearless one. She set out to be one of us. She wanted to build a life, she wanted to get married, she had a boyfriend, she went to see a movie, she was going back home. It's just regular life. That's what she was trying to do. She hadn't called upon herself to become the national hero, because she only wanted to live her life. And I think that really is the biggest challenge, because it is really women who want to live their lives, and are they being enabled to do so? And what are the dangers that they're facing? And the truth is, in most cases, it isn't gang rape. Gang rape is only a small part, and I'm going to talk about some of this stuff later, but most sexual abuse happens in the home, or the perpetrator is known to people. Sexual abuse transcends class. It happens in every kind of family. And it's something that, particularly with children, we keep talking to families about it, because really, our little girls and boys are not safe when so-and-so uncle is taking them for ice cream, because so-and-so uncle or auntie could be an abusive person. And we, as parents, don't always even see it. And the tragedy is that for a child, they cannot explain it. They can't get a sense of what exactly went wrong with them. They perhaps, and sometimes they'll throw a tantrum and say, I don't like so-and-so, and then parents will turn around and say, no, you should be nice to them because it's such. So, it begins from there. It comes, and we were talking about it earlier when Shamsah was going to talk about it. It comes from a place of trust. People, quite often the perpetrator is someone that you trust, or someone who has authority. So, school teachers, tutors are all people who can be a threat, and that means that to be a woman feels like you're forever under threat, which is pretty sucky and not where we want to be, and it isn't where our children should be. So therefore, what do I do as an NGO, as a human rights worker? One of the things that we work towards is prevention and deterrence. The thought process being that if there are institutional mechanisms that are in place, will they serve as deterrents? Which means that if an abuser is identified, will that abuser be brought to justice? And if they think that they're going to be brought to justice, then like Prabakar, they're going to start whinging quite a bit, but they will end up perhaps being much more careful about how they behave. Now, what are the institutional barriers? And that's why we have this glorious panel because each of them are going to talk about one pillar of that barrier. Because the institutional barriers are what, first of all, is going to stop you from even reporting a crime. And Shamsah is going to talk about the mental space that might be. You know, where do you sit? What happens when you are a victim of sexual abuse, when you're a victim of marital rape, when you're a victim of any of these situations, whether it's or you're the mother of a sexually abused child, what happens to you? And there is a series of things that come in. First of all, is fear. It's economic insecurity. It's a sense of shame, sense of not having been responsible, blaming yourself, a whole range of things that Dr. Sunita will know much better than I will, so she will talk about that. The next stage is really that you do decide to go and report. Where will you go? You'll end up in a police station. And truthfully, our country has not yet been able to bring about the changes in the police system that is so crucial. And part of the reason we wanted to do this is because all of you know senior police officials. You're related to some, you meet others socially. Please talk about it. Because what happens is that you know when you're a victim, you never meet IPS, ACP such and such, an IPS officer so and so. You meet inspector and sub-inspector in your police thana. And that person is going to bring to his job, one, a horrible day possibly because he's overworked, he's not very well paid, his life sucks, his life is not at all looking like yours. And therefore he comes from a whole bunch of attitude that he brings to the discussion. And one of the cases that we just looked at was when a young girl went to report rape and the policeman said, "Dikhao kapde utari kaise utara." You know, it's that. And was he trying to do his job? Was he being sadistic? Who knows? But he's certainly not being trained. And our claim is that if India wants to create a police force that is responsive and is able to enforce the law, then first of all there has to be enough training, enough enabling, so that they follow rule of law and do not bring their sort of own attitudes to the job. And that, I think, is where Raha is going to talk about the rule of law part of it, because what are the laws? We have, after December 16, these rape laws, I swear I've been working with Home Ministry for years on these rape laws. It's gone back and forth, much discussions have happened. I think a lot of other people in this room might have been part of these discussions because they've been going on for a long time. But then we rushed through because of the Burma Commission. And the rape laws have been put in place, the prevention of child sexual abuse has been put in place, ending domestic violence has been put in place, prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. There are a series of laws that have been put in place. But none of them will work unless there is one, awareness of what our rights are, what women can use to protect themselves, and also how that law is used by the state. The third barrier is actually a systemic barrier, which is what Dr. Anshul is going to talk about, and that is what happens when evidence gathering begins. Because quite often rape is not, as I said, a gang rape, which is between two people, as was in a private space. And the evidence gathering becomes really crucial. And as of now, we've been campaigning against the two-pillar test because that in itself is a repeat of the rape. It sort of replicates sexual abuse quite often, and the results are made public. So the most famous case related to this is about a woman called Mathura, who was 7 months pregnant and stopped at a police station and was raped by a bunch of policemen, by two policemen. And the judge said, based on the medical records, that she was unmarried but was not a virgin and in fact pregnant, and therefore she was of loose moral character and thus, possibly deserving of the deserving is not really said, but the deserving is such a weird space because I've heard this also, why you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you should be a little bit more careful. We told all of this all the time, and it shouldn't be. It should be the privilege of the woman to do exactly as she wishes to do with her life. So I'll stop there because I think we can talk about the questions later, but students tend to bring themselves. Yes.
And hard to choose.
more about sexual what goes on in a woman's mind.
Kavita, could you go a little bit louder? Mic
What
closer
goes
to
on
you.
in a woman's mind, and after which I would also like to know what goes on in a man's mind. Why is it that he does this? How do we stop all of this?
Thank you, Kavita and Meenakshi, for getting us off to such a thought-provoking start. Well, there are several angles to this. First of all, why do men abuse? It's a complex interplay of psychological, biological, and social-cultural factors. It begins all the way in childhood. So think about it. Boys and girls are brought up differently. There is a differential gender role socialization. Boys will be boys must be macho, you must be aggressive if you want to get your way. So it begins right there. Thereafter, men tend to be more competitive, want a sense of power, domination. Insecure men tend to do this more often. They need sexual prowess, for example, to have control over women, to feel strong and dominated. And often, unfortunately, it reflects a sense of inadequacy, a sense of dependence, immaturity, a level of unassertiveness from the man. So these are all the factors as far as men are concerned. The other important thing is glorification of violence and sexual aggression by the media. I cringe when I see a movie which involves rape. Yes, society is a reflection of what's going on. Movies are a reflection of what's going on in society. But are we doing more harm than good by showing all these things repeatedly? By flooding public memory with all of these vivid images, and is it really necessary? The other thing is an inability of a man, a pathetic, almost sad inability of a man sometimes to read the cues. Cues are read differently. We often hear, women should have been more assertive, etc. But we need to change the way we think. We need to change societal norms, which will take time, but it has to begin all the way from childhood, adulthood, men, women, and society. Women, on the other hand, are brought up thinking that they have to be submissive to be feminine, have to be passive, they have to please a man, not hurt a man's feelings, serve men. And I think, although this is changing for the better, but the change isn't keeping up, right? And we really need to work more on that. Education is the answer. Psychological sequelae can be devastating. So there is an initial phase after, let's say, sexual assault or sexual abuse, where there is utter shock, and like Meenakshi said, it's often a person of trust, it's a violation of trust. It's an initial reaction of shock and humiliation, confusion, selective loss of memory, a sense of betrayal, somehow feeling that they might have brought on the abuse themselves, a sense of lack of control, powerlessness. There's also an interesting thing which happens, which is selective memory, so selectively forgetting parts of the event, which is why to give evidence is not always easy. And then to deal with the second assault, like Meenakshi said, coming out with it in the open, talking to society about it. And often the reaction of the media, having to relive everything, it's actually called the second assault. I think Jodie Foster was the one who first spoke about it this way, following up a movie that she had done on the subject. The other thing which occurs is called post-traumatic stress disorder, which can be chronic and lifelong, sometimes definitely long-term, in which there are a couple of things which happen. So there is re-experiencing of the event by the woman, so flashbacks, nightmares, almost reliving it, avoidance of stimuli. So for example, if a woman is raped in a lift, not entering the lift, avoiding any reminders, feeling numb, feeling a sense of detachment, being very anxious physically, and of course depression is a very common outcome. So feelings of being helpless, sad, confused, being worthless, having low self-esteem, blaming oneself, suicidal thoughts and attempts are known to occur. And if there isn't enough support from society, unfortunately this can just escalate. And so we have to, first of all, change mindsets. We have to attempt to change mindsets. We must know that
being mistreated by another adult is just not acceptable. One. Second, educating women, making women physically, emotionally, and financially independent. And seizing aggression overall in society in whatever way possible might be our answer. And I think platforms like this, where there's an opportunity to do something, a one-stop crisis center would be of tremendous help for such women.
Dr. Banerji, what happens when a girl is raped and she got to tests, the victim tests what is done?
Okay, what is the examination? I'll throw it out.
Okay, so imagine the scene, the scenario is when a woman is raped. Already she's undergoing so much of a mental trauma.
And have to be really careful.
So a woman is raped, she's undergoing a lot of trauma, and then her re-rape takes place in the hands of the police, in the hands of the lawyers, in the hands of the doctors. I don't like to admit it, but that's true. And in the hands of the media. We've been hearing so much about it these last few days. So what I want to say is that the purpose of us gathering here today is to help start this kind of a center, which is when a woman who's been assaulted or raped can go to and be able to get justice. This is what is happening, what we're seeing happening now. So firstly, I want to say that rape is a legal term. It's not a medical condition. So a doctor cannot say that the girl has been raped. All that the doctor can say is sexual activity has taken place. Of course, today the definition of rape is very wide. It encloses a lot of things, not only penetration, but also any kind of a pass made at a girl, any other kind of sexual language use, pornography, so many other things are also included in the definition of rape. So what happens when a rape victim comes to us? See, as social responsible citizens and as doctors, I think we need to take away or decrease their trauma for all that they've gone through. And the only way we can do this is to collect the evidence in a proper, meticulous way, so that the culprit can be nabbed. As Meenakshi said, often the culprit is somebody you already know. It could be a brother or even a father or somebody in the close vicinity. But then there are also people you don't know. And in order to win your case and be able to nab the culprit, because we as doctors can bring about healing by actually helping the victim nab the culprit. So when the patient comes in, when the victim comes in, we take her consent first. It's not necessary that the victim will agree to be examined. She has a right not to be. But you have to explain that she doesn't want to be examined, medically examined. But you can explain to her the consequences of it and how it will help her ultimately in her legal case if she's to get. So we take a detailed history, a medical history, a surgical history, a menstrual history, whether she's had sex 5 days prior to this incident. All this history is taken. The date, time of rape, all the other formalities are completed. How it was done, whether she was coerced into taking any alcohol or any other drugs, that could have led to the rape. After taking the history, what we need to do is examine the patient. In examination, the patient is made to stand on a white sheet of paper, normally, and any evidence, the victim is examined from head to toe for any evidence, because even a small little hair of the person who's raped her can get a DNA match on it and be able to nab the culprit. So buttons and any mud, twigs, anything on the patient. Then the patient is examined to see if there are any vaginal tears, any bruises, and any oral on the breasts are examined. She is examined thoroughly to see whether there is any evidence, if there is any matted pubic head and a part of it is cut. So then now all the evidence has to be collected. Now this is normally done. The WHO has provided kits called rape kits, which have paper bags and other material to collect various swabs from the vagina, for example, for semen. then the clothes of the person, then hair samples, then pubic hair samples. So all these have to be collected and properly labeled and signed and sealed. And then after that, the treatment has to be brought about, which is very important. Tetanus injections have to be given. You have to protect the person from sexually transmitted diseases like gonorrhea and chlamydia and syphilis. So doctors, we give antibiotics. There are specific antibiotics which are given. Then to protect them against hepatitis B, a vaccination is given. Also immunoglobulins are given. For HIV, post-exposure prophylaxis, there's a regime which can be given to these patients to protect them from them. And the most important thing is to do a pregnancy test and see if and to protect them from becoming pregnant by giving them high post-contraceptive pills which are high in estrogen so that they don't become pregnant. And once all this is done and all the evidence and the material is collected, then the patient is followed up and of course the treatment is given. Sometimes x-rays may be needed to see any injuries and also to determine the age of the patient. Because according to the definition of rape, the age is very important in that definition. I'm not going to get into it now. But after that is done, a follow-up has to be done of the victim in terms of the physical, psychological and social and rehabilitation too. And as I said, as doctors, we can just help heal the patient by bringing the culprit to work.
Sunita, I just stand there with your opinion. I just need to understand, let's talk about what are the legal options this girl has when she goes for sexual assault or let's say domestic violence. What is the recourse for her?
Thanks, Meenakshi. I guess I'll start by reiterating what Dr. Banerji just mentioned, that a rape is a legal term and not a medical condition. Ideally, the Indian law describes and terms rape as a criminal offence. It's described as an offence. The Indian Penal Code further defines rape as an intentional, unlawful sexual intercourse by a man on a woman with or without her consent under several circumstances. Now, in view of the recommendations of the Law Commission of India, together with the protests of the general public in view of the famous Nirvaya case, what Meenakshi just spoke about, the Indian Parliament enacted certain amendments in the rape law, towards the rape laws in India. The amendments were basically brought about in the Indian Penal Code, which basically governs the rape laws and the sexual assault and the sexual harassment laws in India, the Code of Criminal Procedure and the Indian Evidence Act. The Indian Penal Code under Section 375 now includes both penile and non-penile insertion as an offence. So any kind of an insertion or any kind of object into the bodily orifices of a woman is now considered as a criminal offence and a rape. So besides that, there are a lot of other, in terms of, say, immediately like what Kavita was mentioning. So as soon as a victim has been abused, sexually abused, the first right, legal right, a woman has a right to legal assistance. She can go to the police station, lodge an FIR under Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code. While she is at the police station, the police has to clearly inform her that she has the right to get her own legal counsel to help her file her case. Secondly, there has to be a female police officer. I believe, Meenakshi, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it is to the extent of head constable, to the rank of a head constable. Thirdly, a woman sexually abused, the victim has to be provided immediate medical attention, plus privacy, and as also counseling. So these are basically, the broad legal rights a woman has. Besides this, there are certain changes which have also taken place in terms of Section 376A has come out in the Indian Penal Code, which basically renders that any sexually abused victim who during the sexual abuse ends up being in a persistent vegetative state, or such a sexual abuse renders the person dead, the punishment has now increased to almost 20 years of rigorous imprisonment. I think, Meenakshi, this is just a basic broad line of immediate legal remedies. Besides this, a lot of women do not want to report such cases to the police. It is basically, I believe, due to humiliation, fear of the society, loss of dignity, and ideally they all should know, and also the loss of identity, where they feel that I believe that mostly women should be made aware that the Indian laws basically prohibits the revelation of the identity of a rape victim. It does not, the police officers are not, including the press, are not allowed to disclose the identity of a sexually abused victim. So there have been changes in the law recently which generally go on. Any kind of a police officer who reveals the identity of a person, of a rape victim, they will be punished under the law, and they will be fined with imprisonment up to about 2 years. So this is a broad framework of how the rape laws in India work. Besides that, I think I will maybe pass on to Meenakshi or Kavita, and if you have any questions, we can go question-wise.
Thank you very much. But one other thing that I read recently was the reporting has increased this year in 2013 vis-a-vis last year. Last year I think about 150 cases. This year about 400. Why do you suppose? Is it after the Mumbai case that people are aware, women are getting called cowards, and what should we do? I think there are about 20 women, and every 20 minutes there's a rape happening. So how do we get all these women to come back and report to the police? What do we do with this?
I think, Kavita, you're absolutely right, because the awareness is so strong now, and with protest of the general public and with the new anti-rape laws, people are getting more aware of it. I think, like I said sometime back, that a lot of women are very, scared of being humiliated, losing their dignity. They have the fear of the society, and now with such stringent laws being in place, women are coming about to go and report. So ideally,
media should really push this.
Media should really push it, and like what Dr. Banerji said, that we all should ideally aim towards opening up some kind of a center, which should have like an immediate relief program for such kind of rape victims. Also, the Indian law does not really say that you have to complain or lodge a complaint if you have been sexually abused or if you've been a victim to a rape. But ideally every woman should go about complaining to the police, making a report of such an act of violence, because this is clear violence and sexually abusing and exploiting the woman. It's the most barbaric act.
Would you like to add anything on the rights the government, any new law that's been coming out to further secure the women of today?
Two things I should talk about. One is the increased reporting. Actually, three things. Increased reporting is also because the police now has to lodge an FIR. So earlier there was almost always a जांच पड़ताल करेंगे उसके बाद में देखेंगे type thing. Now they have to. So the complaints are lodged, and we've seen therefore a spike in numbers. The second is something that we've talked about. Why one of the barriers to not reporting, apart from all the things that we just discussed, is the long drawn out trials. The concern about, oh my God, now my life's going to be taken over because I'll be constantly going to the court, and and then people will not turn up, and that under the new law has changed because there has to be fast track courts. Inclusive of protecting witness, the identity of the person. The last thing I want to talk about is what others have referred to, which is the one-stop crisis center. The one-stop crisis center is not something new. It actually came from South Africa, and it was basically to enable women to feel secure and find the support to come forward. We are encouraging the state to do this. So we work with the Maharashtra government, for instance, to say that you should create this. And I'll tell you why it doesn't happen. I'll give you an example out of Bombay. So Shakti Mill's rape happened, and you realize that once the trial began, when the arrests happened, then this other girl came forward. She had not even complained.